All right, so I promised you that I would show you what Mexico Beach presented to the public on Tuesday at the city council meeting. They brought in their consultant to update everybody on where the money went. All this talk and misinformation, of course, about the $100 million in FEMA money. Where did it go? Everybody wants to know where it went. So Councilman Adrian Welly was instrumental in getting the presentation for everybody to see. And I'm going to go over it quickly with you. And then I'm going to show you the last important minutes, probably 20, 30 minutes of the consultant finishing up, and then the questions and comments by the council itself. All right, so this should clear it all up. After you see this, as I've seen some people say, there should be no more questions, because it'll be proof that it's impossible to misappropriate FEMA money. All right, you're gonna see all this here in just a moment. Before I get started, I want to thank a couple of sponsors so I don't interrupt the flow.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
When your life is on the line, hire the lawyer who lives in our community, works in our community, and worships in our community. I'm Al Saulene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 850-215-0628.
Okay, let's get right to, I'm gonna skim through the presentation. Oh, I'm trying to make sure the presentation is available to you. Let's see if I did it right. I tried to post it. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna try it again. This should be the presentation itself. Let's see if this works. It's only showing up on, oh, there it is. Okay, so if you want to actually see the presentation, because to make sure I'm not hiding anything from you, all right, I want to make sure that you can examine it better later. So let's go over it. All right. And then I really want you to hear the consultant and the city council. All right, the consulting company is Atkins. You see it at the bottom there. Numerous programs provide disaster funding, and boy, did Mexico Beach need it, right? I mean, unbelievable, the damage. The primary program through which the city has received funding so far is called Public Assistance Program. Now, that's a program for the public and not private sector or individuals. The Public Assistance Program, and this is an important point here, is primarily a reimbursement-based program. There are some exceptions, but generally this means you have to complete work, and provide documentation of that work before FEMA or FDEM will give you any money. Typically, the Public Assistance Program has a local match attached to it. All right. Almost every grant program in existence today has a local match. This forces local governments to have some skin in the game. There's some pictures of the damage. Obligated versus paid funds. Obligated funding essentially means that the money has been allocated or set aside by FEMA to be used by the city for a specific use. All right, the city then has to provide documentation to show that it was used for that. The city does not receive a set amount of money that it can use however it wants. Also, obligated does not mean the city has received those funds in their bank account. There's also a paid funding, which is money that has been actually made, that has made it into the city's bank account. This typically comes in the form of reimbursement after work is completed, but may sometimes have been paid through an advance early in the storm. Advance funding must still be reconciled. All right, so there's standard projects and 428 projects. I am not going to get into the weeds, but I have posted this link so that you can look at it more closely. All right. The obligated amount is about $100 million right now. So the city has an estimated $100 million set aside or allocated. That number is subject to some fluctuation. Some of that amount is a hard number, 428 projects. For any given standard lane project, that number could fluctuate up and down. Normally, this money evens out over the course of a disaster across all projects. Now, the city has been paid so far $92 million. That's how much actual funding the city has received in its bank account so far. Florida Division of Emergency Management has validated and audited this amount. $8 million delta from projects that are still underway. Projects that haven't been started, the city has expended funds, so there's no loss to the city. The projects just haven't happened yet, so FEMA and FDEM won't pay out a reimbursement. Projects in FDEM reconciliation, they got to review all the backup documentation for projects before paying a reimbursement. This can take weeks or months to review and validate before they make a payment. Look at that. Oh, my goodness. All right, so there's emergency work like debris pickup. Now, we've heard a lot about debris pickup in the Lynn Haven situation. And at the very time, Councilman Adrian Welly is saying that, look, FEMA money is reimbursed and you got to jump through a lot of hoops. They don't just give it out. And so it really cannot be misappropriated. Well, at the same time he's saying this, 2 men started their prison sentence for stealing FEMA money. And it's the same process in Lynn Haven. Michael White, the former city manager, has begun his prison sentence, and so has Mickey White, the contractor who owned Erosion Control Specialist, ECS. They had devised a scheme where the contractor would inflate the prices and submit invoices that, extra hours that never happened. All right, that all got approved and checked. So to believe that there are not ways to bilk FEMA and the city is either naive or deceitful. Okay? I'm not saying that it happened. Nobody has said it happened because nobody can put a finger on it because nobody can see the details. All right? But it happens a lot. So to say it doesn't happen is either deceitful or naive. The debris pickup, obligated amount $49 million. I would check, by the way, if you want to do a public record request or if anybody's able to see who got the contracts, you might want to find out who got these contracts. Was GAC Contracting involved? Did they get paid? Who are the other ones? Did Ashbrit, the disaster relief consulting company that gave kickbacks to GAC contractors, like $15 million, where Ashbrit, according to the court documents, where Ashbrit and GAC, the late president of GAC, Derwin White, where they conspired to eliminate the third company and pocket the difference? You might want to check if Ashbrit, Ashbritt, Ashbrit, did they get money? Because if GAC Contractors or Ashbrit got money, you might want to look more closely at the invoices and the checks and all that stuff. And if you're confused about it, you can just go to, here's a few things. Like if you say, Bernie, what are you talking about? You crazy idiot. Here you go. You can look up the search warrant affidavit on GAC Contractors by the Bay County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, where the FBI gave a search warrant affidavit to a judge in 2021 saying that Bay County was more corrupt than New Orleans and New Jersey. And it was about Ashbridge, and it was about GAC contractors, among others. So, and you can always look back at ECS, Erosion Control Specialist, and Mickey White. The news calls him David White to protect his identity because he's, he was Derwin White's nephew. And Derwin White had a lot of deep hands in the cookie jar before he passed away. If you don't know that story, it was tragic. He was 55 and he died of COVID. This is what's reported now. He was in the hospital in ICU, and just a few days after he passed away it was a Saturday afternoon. Once he passed away is when the FBI and the sheriff's office went in there to GAC contractors all day long and searched the place and took boxes and boxes and hard drives and all kinds of stuff. And Lynn Haven had the hoops they had to jump through as well. There must be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there are a lot more to stuff your pockets in things like this. All right. So $49 million in debris pickup, dredging, $9 million, emergency protective actions, $7 million. Roughly $75 million obligated for emergency work. Okay. Funding by project type, roads, culverts, stormwater, $8 million. Roadway repairs, obligated $0. Projects ended up in other categories. Cat E, buildings, $1 million. Water sewer system, $6 million. Parks recreational, $6 million. Grant management, $4 million. Grant management. That's, I believe, grant management goes to the consultants. It's good work if you can get it, I'll tell you that. And then here's some pictures of the work. Unobligated projects, jetties, police fire, the pier could be up to $10 million. All right. Again, I've posted the link to this so you can see it. I just want you to see what was in the presentation. All these details. Pier will be rebuilt. How does the city actually get the funding? Okay. And this, I believe, is the last page. Yep. Atkins is the consultant that gave the presentation. And you're going to see the end of it in just a moment. Obligation. FEMA must first obligate a project. Absolutely no money can be paid to the city until a project has been scoped and costed and then obligated. Okay. That's the part there that makes it impossible for anybody to steal FEMA money. Somebody better tell Michael White and Mickey White and get them out of prison. Implementation. Once obligated, the city can proceed with carrying out implementation of the project. It must be carried out exactly following the scope and cost that has been laid out. If the city wants to make any changes, it must be approved by FEMA through an amendment. Now, you might find this interesting. The FEMA consultant in Lynn Haven was really tight with the former city manager, Michael White, who just started the prison sentence. Okay. The current city manager, Vicki Gaynor, has given conflicting stories to the FBI and to the judge. In a interview with the FBI, an official 302 memo, she had said that she walked in late one night to Michael White's office, and this is what it said, that she saw the FEMA consultant lady and the city manager having, making whoopee. But when she was on the witness stand, December 12th, when she was asked about that, she said that is absolutely not true. So the defense attorney said, "Isn't that what you told the FBI?" Well, tell me what happened. And I was there. I watched this. And Vicki Gaynor, the current city manager, said, well, I walked in late, to the city manager, Mickey White's office. I didn't know they were there. I walked in. I didn't know anybody was in there with him. He said, what'd you see, Vicki? She clutched her pearls up on the witness stand and she said, they were not having sex. Well, what did you see? And then she said to the judge that the FEMA lady was just slumped over is all. Slumped over? So what I'm saying is, even FEMA is run by people, right? And sometimes people who work for the federal government, I know it's really hard to believe, do corrupt stuff, have affairs, get really nice gifts, check boxes. The story is just a couple of things. It's incredible that Mayor Margo Anderson is in her last week and a half of prison. She had to go to prison for 30 days for telling the FBI that she met Mickey White in December when really they said it was October. If you agree to that, we'll drop all 64 charges against you. And she did. And she went to prison for that for a month. But I've seen other people say one thing to the FBI and then the opposite to the judge, and it's cool in the gang. Some people have gotten sweetheart deals and protection for saying things at certain times, even if they conflict. All right, back to this. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Reimbursement. When the project's implementation is complete, the city must provide documentation to FDEM to receive reimbursement funds for the work. This includes things like contractor invoices. There was a real problem with that one over there in Lynn Haven with ECS. And guess who blew the whistle on that? Mayor Margo Anderson did. On April 1st of 2019, she went to Sheriff Tommy Ford April 1st, 2019. And April 2nd, 2019. And she said, Sheriff, I have discovered that ECS contractors, the contractors, have inflated prices and billed the city for $5 million, and it doesn't look right. Sheriff Ford said, what? Don't tell anybody and bring me the invoices. Go get those invoices. So Mayor Anderson said, absolutely. She went to see Vicki Gaynor, the acting city manager, because the other guy I was just telling you about, Michael White, he had been fired because he got in a fight with his wife and pointed a gun had a gun involved that the city gave him. So he'd gotten fired by that time. So Vicki Gaynor was the acting city manager, and Mayor Anderson went to her, said, I need to get these invoices from ECS. And somehow Chief Ricky Ramey was there. And between there and Sheriff Ford, several days had passed, and Chief Ramey and had him. And by the time they got to the sheriff, they implicated Mayor Anderson. And then, when Mayor Anderson was indicted from documents that she tried to give Sheriff Ford, somehow she implicated herself. By that time, she said, I'm the whistleblower here. And Sheriff Tommy Ford and Major Jimmy Stanford, the head of the public trust unit, they said, no. We had already discovered all this a couple weeks ago. Because when city manager Michael White had the gun in the fight with his wife, we had his phone, and we went through his phone, and we found it all. So we've already been investigating this. But guess what? The sheriff's office didn't get a search warrant to search Michael White's phone until after Mayor Anderson blew the whistle. Yeah. So there could not have been a prior knowledge and investigation before she blew the whistle. It was after she blew the whistle that they convened with the FBI and they began their investigation and indicted her and James Finch, the whistleblowers. Now, we don't know exactly why that happened, and we don't know exactly why the people who took the money and ran have full immunity. I mean, there are people with Hunter Biden style full immunity in perpetuity, evidently. Oh, it's crazy. But anyway, so I just want to tell you, if you don't think that there's a potential for big old cookie jars because FEMA's involved, you are what is known in the legal profession. It's an acronym, OUCHO. It's pronounced oucho, if you've ever heard it. And if you don't know the word, I'll use it in a sentence. If you don't think that they are big, giant cookie jars with regard to FEMA, you are out your mind. That's try to put it in a sentence for you. All right, I got to get back to this. Okay, so let's go to the meeting, though. Let's go to the meeting, and I want you to see the city's consultant that Adrian Welly brought in. And this is the end of it. He's going to give his closing statements so that we all know, and then the council's going to ask him questions, lead him a little bit. And yeah, this happened just on Tuesday, just a few days ago at the city council meeting. And I promise you're not going to want to miss it. But let me thank a couple more sponsors.
Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777. It's a hot time in Florida, and my friend Ryan can make sure your air conditioning is running at peak efficiency. He could even install a new one, built to a higher standard, American standard. Find out more at pcairrepair.com. Now, if you want to have all this, right, if you want to have everything I've posted about this and all the shows in one email, right, maybe you know somebody who doesn't have Facebook, but they'd like to have this information, put their email on the here. What I'm saying is tonight, after the show, so you'll have, if you're not subscribed, it takes like 20 seconds, you put your email in, and it's free. So if you don't want to miss any of this, in just one email every Friday night, go to bernie.substack.com and just all you do is put your email in there. That's it. And you'll get one every Friday night. You won't miss a thing. It's free and it's that easy. There's also a way, if you really like what I'm doing, for you to do a paid subscription to support my work. You don't have to. Boy, it helps. Boy, it helps. Bernie.substack.com. All right. Make sure you do that. Go to that and put your name and get the one that I'm going to send tonight. And you'll see everything from the whole week. You'll say to your friends or family, you won't believe this stuff, but I can't find it. Well, it'll be in your email box. You're going to love it. All right. So let's take a look at the actual meeting here. I'm going to try and play as much of this as possible. But pay close attention. And if you hear something that gets your attention, please post, comment, and tell me, because sometimes oftentimes always you, see things that I don't see, and some of the tips are fire. So if any of this triggers something you need to tell me, please let me know. All right, here we go. This is Atkins Consultant. I think his name is Ryan, giving the presentation. And here you go.
I know Michael mentioned that,
Goodness. Hold on. What's happening?
it would be helpful to kind of get just like a general high-level understanding of the process for how the city actually gets funding into the bank. And some of these things I've talked about already a little bit, and we'll just kind of be reiterating. But rule number one, and kind of step number one, is that FEMA has to obligate a project before anything can happen to get any money in the bank. And again, that means them scoping the project and estimating a cost of the project. They lay it out and say, here's what you have to do. And the city is working with them at this point, agreeing to it or not agreeing to it. And that's what a lot of the fighting that we have done along the way has been about, is trying to agree with FEMA on the scope and design of these projects. But I underline this because it's really important, is that absolutely no money can be paid to the city until a project has been scoped and costed and then obligated. The city doesn't get any money until we define what the scope of that project is and get it pushed through all the steps on the FEMA side, where they do environmental reviews, they do reviews on local codes and all of these things to make sure that you're compliant with the scope of work. So we have to get it obligated before we can get any money for it. Once we get it obligated, then the city can go on and carry out the project. This is where, we've had David from Dewberry here before. This is where he starts to come into the process, is that then he'll start doing things like figuring out design and bidding the project out to construction so that we can get a contractor on to actually do the work when it's an infrastructure project or a permanent work project. Similarly, on the debris side, we have to bid out to get these contractors. We have to follow all of the FEMA rules for eligibility, like they have procurement rules that we have to follow. We have to follow the city's own procurement rules. I know I've said that 1,000 times up here, to be able to do this work in a way that FEMA will reimburse us in the long run. And so all of this has to be carried out, again, following the scope and cost that were laid out through the project obligation that's written up in their system, and we have a scope of work that we have to follow. If we want to do something different, or if the costs end up more, we have to submit an amendment to FEMA. Again, even though they'll reimburse based on actuals, if the cost ends up more than what they have estimated, we have to go to FEMA and say, hey, this was more than estimated. Can you approve our amendment request and push it back through the system and then show that higher dollar amount? So we got to go through FEMA, that even though once we get it obligated, we still have to kind of work through them if things change along the way. Then once we've implemented the project, let's say we've constructed the boat ramp project, done those repairs, that's when the city then takes all the documentation, things like I talked about before on the debris project, all the load tickets, all the haul tickets, all those things, and we send it over to FEMA in a package, send it over to FEMA in a package, and they review it all. And that package on a high level kind of includes things like contractor invoices, cleared bank checks, design drawings, debris tickets, procurement documents, all the things, which there's millions of, that FEMA needs to show, for us to show them, to show that we did the work properly.
So money doesn't get to us till 3, not at 1. It looks a little bit like it comes at 1, but it's
it
not.
does not come at 1 at all. Yes, absolutely no money can be paid out until the city has been obligated. But then we still, yeah, I see what you're saying, but then we still have to go through the process of actually implementing the project, because it's a reimbursement-based program.
Question.
Yeah.
How long does that take?
Which
The reimbursement.
The reimbursement is what I was talking.
When we send the paperwork in,
Yeah.
how long does it take them, even though we're not out of money, the contractor's probably gonna get paid?
Right. So, and that's what I was saying kind of earlier, is that oftentimes that takes weeks to months to get through, because they have to go through each ticket, or again, we're just using that debris
Right.
as an example, that each load ticket to match up to the haul ticket, to match up to the invoice, to the debris monitor logs, all those things have to match up, and so they're going through line by line by line.
And we are out that money because they need to clear the bank before they reimburse us.
Yeah.
So we are out that money. We've paid the check. The check has to clear before we can submit to reimbursement.
Yeah. And
So the money for the debris collection, as your example,
Yeah.
the city had to pay that.
yeah, you pay it up front and you get money back. And that's part of been one of the things that the city has had to work really hard on. It's not, I won't say it's no issue now, but back in the early days, it was hard because of that cash flow.
Did we get a loan?
Huh?
We didn't have $50 million. Did we get a loan?
No, but you didn't get $50 million of work done at one time.
The governor fronted some money early on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, that you got some money up front to sort of seed money, if you will, to get that work going. And then the work takes place over the course of years, and sometimes you're paying this contractor, then you get a reimbursement for that, so you're even there, but then you pay the next contractor, you get a reimbursement, you're even there, so it goes along. Yeah. And it's
money forever.
Yeah, and it's not an easy process, and I'm doing, as an aside, I am doing a lot of work down in South Florida as well under Hurricane Ian. And those communities are running into the exact same problem right now because they're less than a year out, and right in that 1 year mark is where you start really having challenges with your cash flow issues. And luckily now, Mexico Beach is pretty well past it. Again, I don't want to say that there's no issues with having to, you want your reimbursement as fast as possible, of course. But it's a lot more stable now than it was when you're having to deal with all this cash flow issues at the 1 year mark when you've got all that money tied up. So,
Since you're working in Fort Myers, just a question.
yeah.
I know after the governor came here, went back to legislature, we got the money to pay the rest, because otherwise we were out $20 million. Did he do the same thing down there?
Yeah, there's lots of, and I will say this,
I'm
there's,
just curious.
yeah, there's programs almost every disaster that again kind of try to put some money into local communities' hands at the front end so that they can start making those payments and debris. But one thing I'll always say is that almost always that money is tied to, you have to provide the documentation before we give you more money. So I'm using this again as a rough example. The city, I think, got like 15, 20 million up front, but then they're not giving you any more money until you show them that you've done 15, 20 million dollars of work, and then you can tie that back. So.
And we got lucky early on because we got the 45-day 100% from the governor early on.
Yeah,
First
that's true
45
too.
days.
That's true too. So,
Let's hit four before any more questions.
yes. So then after this step 3 is where FDEM, who is the state, has the money in their coffers from FEMA to pay this out, right? They can pay out these reimbursements once we've shown them that we have the documentation. But there's still another step after that, which is closeout, which is now where FEMA comes in at the end of this. So they start the process, and then they come back at the end, and they say, all right, now we're going to do the same exact review that FDEM just did, because we have money in this, that's same as FDEM, same as most local governments, although obviously not you guys. So they go through a closeout process, which is basically a secondary review of all the documentation. And when they are finally satisfied, we can close out the disaster once they've got through all this. So there's a new reviewer at the federal level who does close out. The state reviewer does reimbursement, the federal reviewer does closeout. And it tends to be much more laborious and comprehensive. They want to make sure that the money that they obligated from the very beginning and their scopes of work, as I've said many times, have been carried out and approved. They do like final inspection reports where at the beginning of this, they do a site inspection to try to assess the damage. At the end of this, now they come out for another site inspection report, a final inspection report as they call it, to see, okay, did you repair the places that were damaged? We took pictures and stuff on the front end so that we could see where the damage was. Now we're coming back in and making sure that you actually did the work that we said that you could do. So, yeah.
Let me ask you an unfair question you're not prepared for. In terms of getting hit directly by a Category 5 hurricane 5 years out, would you say that the city is behind schedule or ahead of schedule?
I mean, my personal opinion, and again, I've been around for a while, is that this is a very fast recovery. We've got, I've worked all over, and I was talking to a colleague or friend, I guess work acquaintance recently at a conference who was telling me that in Katrina, they're still rebuilding their sewer systems in Biloxi. They're still rebuilding, a lot of the infrastructure in New Orleans. Obviously, this is a much smaller city, much smaller scale, but I remember Katrina, and it was in 2005, so it was 18 years ago, and they are still working through the public assistance funds in those places. So I think we're moving fast. I'm biased because I work on this, but I mean, when you look at the numbers of how much money we've been paid out on the amount that we've been obligated, it's saying we're 92% there, and even if you account for the extra 15 million that I'm estimating, that's 80% of the way there, and that is really fast for for a Cat 5 hurricane, is my opinion.
Ryan, I got a question. On your
Yeah.
428 projects,
Yeah.
is the process on that different than this?
This process is the exact same. The only difference is, as I mentioned, is that when you're doing the reimbursement side of things, you might be sharing money between two different projects. So you would have to go in and say, on project A, we had an overrun, and B, we had an underrun, and that's
Okay.
why we're asking for more on A versus B.
Okay, but the money's not, we don't, still on these 428 projects, we don't have that money in the bank that's being shared against, across
Correct.
projects.
We still have to get
We
reimbursed
still have
for
to
it.
do the
Yeah,
reimbursement.
yeah.
Okay, so
It's just a matter of like when you're doing what we call financial reconciliation on it at the FDM level. Sorry. I should say when FDM, sometimes I do work for FDM. When we're doing when FDM's doing reconciliation, they just have to know which project that funding is ultimately going towards, again, within the 428 realm.
How many 428s have we had, do you know?
We have, I want to say, I think it's around 10 428s. Again, total projects that we have are probably around 50. So it's a smaller percentage of our total projects, but we do have some that we're sharing.
Okay, so this would be similar to the one on Florida? The pipes going in, is that a 428 project?
Florida, the stormwater project? No, that is not a 428 project.
Okay.
That is a standard project. The Marino is a 428 project, Canal Parkway Bridge was a 428 project, the Welcome Center, Sidewalks project, the Roads project. I'm not going to be able to name them all.
That's okay.
But yeah, those are all 428 projects.
Okay, so, because on the contract for that Florida Avenue, or the Florida pipe going in, it says 48 inch, and they had to go down to 36 because when they dug it up, they seen the 36 inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even though the contract said one number, we don't have to worry about that number because we'll just use what the receipts we get from that project, right?
Yeah, and that, for example, change wasn't cost sharing between projects. It was just the pipe underground wasn't what we thought it was going to be, and they amended it.
But
That's
our
very-
obligation to that was more.
That's a really
because
complex
that's gonna be
project.
complex.
You picked a great little exceptional one, but basically what happened on that project, going back to the very beginning, is that
I want to remind you of something that I say often. And again, this is where I would put a, excuse me, I would put a pin in this, right? I would go back and pay more attention to this part, because anytime I hear government say or consultants say that something is very complex, there is a general rule when investigating fraud or potential fraud, okay? And the general rule is complexity masks fraud. So whenever you hear it's very complex, you need to run it down and find out if it's good or not. And normally it is. But that's where you often find problems. Complexity masks fraud. All right, here we go.
because a lot of the stormwater infrastructure is located underground. When FEMA came out to do a site inspection, they couldn't see all the damage that had occurred. And they acknowledged that they could not see all the damage that had occurred. So they said, well, the only way that we're going to be able to identify all the damages, which is how you build a project out, is by doing video inspection underground. And they knew that we...
I want to point out one other thing. Stormwater, whenever you hear stormwater, and it's important. I mean, Lynn Haven is unbelievable when it comes to flooding. So what do local governments do? What do local politicians do? They see an opportunity for a slush fund. So the slush fund 8 years ago, used to be the bed tax, but they've maxed that out. They've maxed that out. So I was told 4 years ago, watch for the next slush fund. It's going to be stormwater. I said, really? And I'll be damned if Panama City Beach didn't get a $21 million grant from HUD. They said that Pier Park was a blighted area. They submitted old maps and lied to the government, got $21 million so they can dig 30-foot deep a trench into the Gulf of Mexico, underground, 30 feet deep underground, to discharge bacteria-ridden stormwater that they're bringing from north of Back Beach Road, underground pipes, into a giant underground pipe into the Gulf of Mexico, which will create hypoxic zones and a dead zone. And now the city says, well, hell, it's going to actually be more than $40 million. So whenever you hear stormwater, the people say, thank God you're finally addressing an important issue. But what I'm telling you is when you hear stormwater in Bay County, look for it to drain wetlands so developers can build on the wetlands, which will ruin the wetlands because the water that naturally absorbs into the soil and percolates and does its beautiful magic with our environment and the ecology, that water, they're going to discharge it into the Gulf, and they're looking at it now in Mexico Beach. That's what's around the corner, Mexico Beach. Protect your wetlands because the developers want to drain them and build on them and send stormwater that would normally absorb into the soil into the Gulf of Mexico. Politicians would put arsenic in the Gulf if the kickbacks were big enough. So when you hear stormwater, just take a good look at that too.
We need to get started on some of the stormwater work immediately. And so they said, obviously, as I've said several times here, you guys can't be paid for anything until we obligate a project. So what we're going to do is we're going to obligate a project for what we know has been damaged. We're also going to obligate funding for you to do the video inspection and write into the scope of work that there is going to be additional damage that we're going to identify after we do the video inspection. When you have identified it, City of Mexico Beach, send a project amendment back to us, and then we will rewrite the scope of that project and obligate you more money on that project. So again, I'm trying to keep a really high level for you guys, but there are things that can happen along the way where, you know, FDM or FEMA are working with us to try to say, like, our system, our process is not perfect for you guys recovering quickly. Here's the thing that we can do. And so that's why we ended up with this kind of wonky situation where we're, you know, ending up with more than we ever had originally obligated because, again, we have these fluctuations that sometimes occur.
And I want to say that Atkins and Ryan has done a great job because we would have had to pay that 25% and they have gone above and beyond to get us obligated these funds that we don't have to come out of. And without paying people like Atkins to do that, we would have had to come up with those funds. So
We are very fortunate.
we are.
And Ryan specifically.
And I appreciate you giving a rundown on this because it really helps clear things up a little more.
Yep, for sure.
I have one more.
Yep.
I think you did a really good job of answering where the $100 million went that we've been saying just disappeared for months, we keep hearing. We have a clear record of where it is. So now let's talk about the.
So that's Councilman Adrian Welly, and he is extremely sensitive about this. When I went up to the podium a couple of months ago, and I said, when I found out $100 million came through Mexico Beach, it got my attention, right? He's stuck on that. He's it's misinformation, he says. And now that we know that 9 million went here and 49 million went for debris pickup, now that we know that, we know where the money went. Okay. Who needs to see detailed invoices, for God's sake? I mean, Atkins Consulting is fantastic, and Dewberry Engineering, they would never do anything wrong. And the consultants, and you know, if Mexico Beach did pay a bunch of money to GAC contractors or Ashbrit, you know, just because the FBI told a judge that they were conspiring to steal like $15 million in Lynn Haven doesn't mean they're doing it everywhere. So, you know, Adrian Drama Queen Welly here, he's the smartest guy in the room. I know because he says so. All right, I tease. But he's very hung up on this issue. And he really wants everybody to know that now that you know where the blocks of money went, okay, you can't steal from FEMA. Just because Michael White and Mickey White just went to prison for it, there are always anomalies, okay? All right, let's get back to Adrian Welly here with the $100 million and the misinformation he's trying to clear up. But by the way, nobody said $100 million went missing. You see what they do? You say $100 million went through here. We'd like to see the invoices. And this is his specialty. He's very much like Jeff McConnell this way. What he'll say is he'll set up a straw man. He'll set up a fake thing. You know, people said $100 million went missing. Nobody said that. That's why you don't. That's why you just laugh at them when they try this little trick where you look over here. We're not arguing about that. We just would like to see some invoices. Find out where the checks went. Maybe double check that the work was actually done. That's all.
The scrutiny of it. Can we get into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking between when the city receives that invoice to Atkins, ACDC, FDM, FEMA, how many people do you think reconcile and scrutinize that invoice before it's
Oh
approved?
my gosh. So the contractor's going to reconcile their own invoice.
I know the answer. I know the answer, Adrian. I know the answer. The same amount that did it in Lynn Haven, the same amount of layers of agencies that did it where the FBI told the judge Bay County is more corrupt than New Orleans and New Jersey. Adrian Welly's trying to say that because the contractors submit their invoices of work done, and then it goes through a bunch of bureaucrats. I just told you about the lady in Lynn Haven, the FEMA lady in Lynn Haven, that was either, depending on which time Vicki Gaynor, the city manager in Lynn Haven, talked to the FBI. She told the FBI in an FBI memo that she walked in on them having sex, and then later on told the judge, no, she didn't. I walked in and the FEMA lady was just slumped over. That's what Vicki Gaynor told the judge. She was just slumped over. They weren't having sex, though. I don't know, Michelle. I don't know. But slumped over late at night in his office? Adrian Welly says that they're looking closely at the to make sure there's no problems. It slumped over, taking a good look late at night in the office, Bernie. But Adrian Welly wants to know. I got to go back to this part. It's too good. How many people take a look at this? Now, listen closely to the first thing that Ryan says, Ryan Wetterman. He says, well, the contractors submit their own. That's often where the problem is. Listen, watch this. This is great.
We would have had to come up with those funds. So
We are very fortunate.
we are.
And Ryan specifically.
And I appreciate you giving a rundown on this because it really helps clear things up a little more.
Yeah, for sure.
I have one more.
Yep.
I think he did a really good job of answering where the $100 million went that we've been saying just disappeared for months. We keep hearing. We have a clear record of where it is. So now let's talk about the scrutiny of it. Can we get into that a little bit?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking between when the city receives that invoice to Atkins, ACDC, FDM, FEMA, how many people do you think reconcile and scrutinize that invoice before it's
Oh my
approved?
gosh. So the contractor's going to reconcile their own invoice first, of course. You can't necessarily trust that, but you know they're going to go through and obviously do humans work to try to review it. Then we'll review it. In the case of like debris work and all, we actually have two sets of reviews. One is that there's a debris hauler who's picking up the debris, and then as you mentioned earlier, we have debris monitors where.
So in Lynn Haven, they brought in a company called Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech was working with panhandle debris removal or disaster relief, whatever. That was a company quickly set up by the contracted engineer in Lynn Haven, Chris Forehand. So Chris Forehand was was at once like hauling, I believe it was hauling, and and counting. Tetra Tech, if you look at the indictment and if you look at the search warrant affidavit given by the FBI to the judge to raid GAC right after Derwin White passed away, you'll see that the fraud, Adrian, and Adrian knows this very well. He knows all about this stuff. The fraud takes place with the counters lying for the haulers, getting kickbacks, and the contractors inflating prices and adding hours that never happened. He knows this. I mean, does he think we're amateurs?
We're paid to basically look over the shoulder of those debris contractors and make sure that they're doing their work right. They submit to us, then we'll review it, so that's not even getting up to the state and federal level yet. But then, once we get to the state level, they'll have what they'll normally call like a junior level reviewer who will go through and do like a first pass. Then they'll have somebody come in who's more senior level, do a QC on that, and then once we get to close out, you'll have the same thing, a FEMA reviewer who's more junior level and a FEMA level QCer. So yeah, it's probably 5 or 6 people.
Before it comes back to get paid, and then it goes up and does it again?
Yeah, before it comes back to get paid. It doesn't, what do you mean, do it?
Well, because you guys approve it, yes, you can pay this bill.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see.
And then it goes back up again, and then it ends with a single audit, the audit time of federal funds.
Yeah, not so. And then you've got the audit on top of it.
So it's probably 20 to 30 people see every invoice.
So when you hear, when you see no curiosity from a government official, when a government official is making the argument for the consultant and for the contractors and for the debris counters and for the debris haulers, before it even gets to him, before it even gets to the city, when you see public officials making the argument for that there's no way there could be any fraud right after we've had tons of it, that is a red flag. Adrian Welly is acting as if every contractor, and by the way, well, I'm not going to get off track, that everybody was on the up and up, that it's impossible that anybody was not. He's making that argument rather than saying there's a lot of questions, let's take a close look at it. That is, oh my goodness, that is so amazing. Amazing, isn't it? He is certain that there's no way there could have been any fraud. Even though the invoices haven't been, so just block some of this block went here, 49 million to debris hauling. See? That's clearly good to go. He's making an argument rather than the guy claims to be infallible. He claims to be all-knowing and all-knowledgeable about everything. That anything contrary to any legitimate question based on what's happened around here and what the FBI told a judge around here, any question is clearly misinformation and a conspiracy theory. You might want to look at that guy first. Any government official who claims that they're absolutely clean and pure, look at that dude first. I'm telling you.
I don't know if it's not. It's a lot of people that are looking at your invoices.
Is there any money that comes to the city that is sitting there waiting to be used on a project?
No, I mean, that's the whole thing of the reimbursement side of things, right?
Okay.
Is that,
There's
money obligated that
Yes.
is allocated to you guys to use, but until you actually use it, then.
So what we have in the bank, how did our funds get to that point that we could use those funds to pay to get reimbursed? Was it just that cycling of funds?
Yeah, and again, as Adrian mentioned, you've got a small chunk that the state gives you up front just to try to get you going so that you can kind of take care of all those.
We got a little lucky early on that we had a brand new governor that wasn't quite sure how it worked and overpromised some things at a press conference on like day 5. It worked out well for us.
All right.
I think the important part is to look at it, and I think the way to look at it is $75 million of it was spent within the first, let's say,
Yeah.
3 months. So
Yeah.
we're talking about
Now this is the Vice Mayor Richard Wolf. He's the guy that still can't believe that the press is allowed to videotape. He's still shocked that the press can videotape what goes on in government meetings. He slammed his fist on the table and yelled at Mayor Miller a month after she got the job and said, "My goodness, the city charter says I'm the CFO. I probably should be looking at these invoices and making sure, since my neck's on the line, maybe I should be." And he said, "Didn't you look at your job description? We're all exactly the same." Now the mayor gets paid more because the mayor's the CFO and the chief elected administrative and fiscal official of the city, and he knows this, but he pretends he doesn't know it. Now you have a second councilman arguing that everything is clean. All right. There's another one you might want to look at.
17 million that got spent over that time, and then another 8 that's still allocated to be operated. So we're really talking about $17 million that basically would be projects.
Yeah.
And we just
Private
need
core
to,
project.
we really need to feel blessed. We are.
Yeah.
To come back in this,
Yeah.
to this degree in this amount of time. And I
Yeah.
think there's a couple of questions out in the audience. Excuse me, not the audience.
All right. I'm gonna wrap it up. But I wanted you to see that because there are people who say this is proof positive that everything's on the up and up. There can be no stealing of FEMA money because, my goodness, do you not know how many hoops they have to jump through? So when $49 million goes to debris cleanup, you trust the people who count the debris cleanup. You trust the contractors. You trust every step of the way, because we don't have any examples within 15 miles. Now, maybe within about 40 miles, there might be some examples, but yeah, that's on the other side of the county. Couldn't happen around here. You ought to have more humility. This is what I wish that we had from elected officials: more humility, a service-oriented mindset, more curiosity, a healthy dose of skepticism, and a commitment to protecting the rights of the people you serve and the environment, like the wetlands. 176. I was wrong, by the way. Fewer than I think it was about, let me see, 283 and 253. Fewer than 600 people voted in Mexico City in April. I think they have 1,000 voters. 176 people signed a petition, said, please don't impact the wetlands to build those homes for the developer. Please don't do that. Mexico Beach is a very small city. Small. Our wetlands are tremendous value, resource. The water that absorbs there and percolates under the ground. And please don't. And even the people who can't stand me in Mexico Beach, there are people who can't stand me in Mexico Beach. They all said, please don't do this. And guess what they did? The three amigos. I mean, three stooges. That's not three amigos. Jerry Bad Liability Smith, Adrian Drama Queen Welly, and Richard Wolf. Iron Fist? Maybe that's what he Iron Fist. Oh my goodness. Anyway, they all, right after saying we got to listen to the people, they said, please don't, and they voted to do it anyway. So these are the kind of things I would love to see in elected officials. Elected officials who don't circle the wagons when they see something wrong. Elected officials who are willing to lose their seat to do the right thing. These are the kinds. Elected officials who are determined to bring transparency. If I was an elected official, if I was on that board, guess what? You would know what the government knows. Vote for Bernie. You'll know what the government knows if you vote for me. I'm going to tell you the truth. If I were Mayor Miller and I said, hey, I'm the CFO, according to the charter, never has been disputed before. I get paid more than the rest of the council because I have other duties and obligations. I'm the CFO. Yeah, we have a city administrator, but not a city manager. A city administrator, a helper to the CFO and to the chief elected administrative official of the city. So therefore, I would like to see some invoices. I've been here 3 months. Still don't see the invoices. I see the big blocks, some checks, but I want to see the invoices. And if you tell me that the invoices are in that room over there, or in a closet, or guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to walk over and open it up, grab the boxes, go into a room and start looking through them. Start snapping pictures of them. Start making copies. That's what I'm going to do. And you, council members, are going to have to blockade the door. You are going to have to call the police, call the sheriff's office. And they might arrest you. They've done it before. They arrested the whistleblower and protected the real criminals, Sheriff Tommy Ford and his public trust unit. But if I'm the CFO, I'm going and grabbing the boxes. You're going to have to stop me. But I'm going through the boxes. I'm not asking a clerk. I'm not asking a staff member. I'm not asking the rest of the council who is there to vote on legislation, ordinances, and resolutions, and the vision of the city. I'm not asking. I'm going and getting it. Because I know when the feds come in, they're going to say, if there's anything wrong, and there's probably not, but if there is, the feds are going to say, because Sheriff Ford is down to say, the feds are going to say, hey, who's in charge of this? And all the council members are going to say, the CFO, the city administrator, all we got were reports. The three amigos, stooges, we just got reports is all. We didn't see the invoices. We trusted our staff. That's not going to be enough to save you. Do you think I would? Not only would I find out where they are and go physically get them, I would bring a video camera crew along to ensure, and maybe even an attorney, or maybe even someone with public trust, maybe even, I don't know, maybe even Sheriff Tommy Ford. And we're going to go in there to make sure I'm not, as the CFO, I'm not putting lines through numbers and folding some up, putting them in my pocket. Everybody's got to be watched. I'm going through them. Do you think I would? Or do you think I'd let the Three Stooges stop me? Then a judge is going to have to decide. But I got to hand it to Mayor Michelle Miller. For somebody who has not been around politics, and for somebody who they tried to prevent from running, they pulled a Donald Trump on her. She was a planning board member last year. And they tried to put her in jail for a sunshine law violation on the planning board. The planning board is held to sunshine law. And the state attorney, the leading prosecutor in Bay County, he prosecuted her right before the election. Did you know that Larry Bassford prosecutes sunshine law violations? Yeah. Only if you're Michelle Miller and the other people on the planning board, that they wanted off so that they could put Lee Elzy in there and Rock, the other guy, and, you know, she's doing a great job for somebody who's just learning all this stuff. And they're doing all they can. They're pulling out all the stops, aren't they? They got the city attorney saying flip-flopping from last year. They got everybody trying to make it out like she's Mayor Meany. Mayor Meany's running off everybody. Watch out for Mayor Meany. Yeah, I'm telling you what. If my neck's on the line, CFO. Yeah, I'm looking at the invoices. And that's, you know, it's going to get there, I'm sure, at some point. But there is, I got to tell you, you're more likely on July 28th. The odds are better that you're going to find out where the checks went. Where the checks went, how many hours the contractors said it took to clean up stuff and haul debris. And you're more likely to find out what the real numbers are and see if they match than you were in March before the election. Progress. And you can tell by the reaction that it's a hot time in Florida. Am I right or wrong? Hey, I want to thank, hey, before I do that, I am about to write and send the newsletter. And if you want to see all the shows and every post on Facebook for the whole week, every Friday night, I send out the newsletter. And it has the shows on them. You don't even need Facebook. The newsletter, the email, it's an email. You can see everything in one email every week. And if you want that, all you got to do is put your email in there. Bernie.substack.com. It is free. Bernie.substack.com. It's coming in about 20 minutes in your email box. If you put your email in there, Bernie.substack.com. It's that easy. It's free. There's also a way to support my efforts if you want to. If you think it's worth it, Bernie.substack.com. Also, finally, thank you to the Unknown Patriot for your support, as always. And I am going to wrap up. You'll get all this stuff. You'll get all of it every week. I'm going to put it together and send it out in just a moment, and I will see you soon.